My name is Dahlia Bowen, and I was 17 years old when my father burned my future in our backyard. One failed exam. That's all it took. 67 points on a chemistry midterm, and suddenly I was worthless. Too stupid for college, too broken to dream. He tore 23 books from my closet, books I'd bought in secret with money I earned scrubbing floors. He ripped apart 47 pages of my college essay. Every word I'd written about my dead mother turned to ash while my grandmother watched and nodded. Education is wasted on someone like you, he said. You'll work as a maid. I've already arranged it. What he didn't tell me? 3 weeks earlier, Harvard had sent me a full scholarship. $312,000, and he had hidden it. Before I tell you how I found out, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. This is how it all began. In Westbrook, Connecticut, your worth was measured by the logos on your acceptance letters. Yale, Princeton, Harvard. These weren't just schools. They were currencies, traded at country club brunches and whispered about at PTA meetings. And my father understood that currency better than anyone. Richard Bowen was a real estate broker with a corner office overlooking Main Street and a seat on the Westbrook Real Estate Board. He drove a black BMW X5, wore watches that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and never missed an opportunity to mention that our house on Maple Ridge Drive had 4 bedrooms and a wine cellar. To the outside world, he was the picture of success, charming, confident, a pillar of the community. To me, he was the man who put me in the smallest bedroom at the end of the hallway, as far from his office as architecturally possible. My mother, Sarah, had died 5 years ago. Cancer. The kind that announces itself politely, then takes everything without warning. She was 39. I was 12. And when she left, she took with her the only person in that house who ever looked at me and saw something worth nurturing. Now it was just my father, my grandmother Patricia, who visited every Sunday to remind me how much I resembled my mother, and not in a complimentary way, and the silence that filled every room my mother used to brighten. I still had her scarf, the one she'd been knitting before the diagnosis stole her ability to hold the needles. Cream-colored wool, soft and unfinished, hidden in my desk drawer where my father would never think to look. Some nights, I'd hold it against my cheek and pretend I could still smell her perfume. Those nights were the only times I let myself cry. The Thanksgiving dinner 6 months ago should have been a warning. My father had invited the Caldwells, business partners, potential investors in some strip mall development he was pushing. Mrs. Caldwell wore pearls. Mr. Caldwell talked about golf handicaps. Their daughter, Madison, was apparently headed to Brown on early decision, a fact my father made sure to bring up 3 times before the turkey was carved. Madison's going to do great things, my father said, raising his wine glass. Some kids just have that drive, you know, that hunger. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. My grandmother, seated at the head of the table like she owned the place, nodded sagely. Dahlia takes after her mother. Sarah was a dreamer too, always had her head in the clouds. She paused, letting the implication hang. Look where that got her. I focused on cutting my green beans into perfect, identical pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4. What none of them knew, what I had never told anyone except my guidance counselor, was that I had submitted my Harvard application 2 weeks earlier. Early action. My essay was about watching my mother die in a hospice bed and finding purpose in volunteering at that same hospice, helping other families navigate the worst moments of their lives. I had a 4.3 GPA, a 1580 SAT score, over 400 hours of volunteer work, but I had learned, somewhere between my mother's funeral and my 15th birthday, that sharing achievements in this house was like offering meat to wolves. Someone would always find a way to tear it apart, so I said nothing. I smiled, I ate my green beans, and I waited for a letter that would prove them all wrong. My father controlled everything: the thermostat, the Wi-Fi password, the narrative about who I was and who I would become. But mostly, he controlled the money, I didn't have a bank account. Girls don't need to manage finances, he'd said when I turned 16 and asked. That's what husbands are for. He gave me $20 a week, cash, counted out like I was a child receiving an allowance, and expected a full accounting of every purchase. A coffee with friends, a notebook for school, everything documented, everything justified. When I needed a $45 SAT prep book, he laughed. What's the point? You could study for 100 years and still not be Ivy League material. He'd gone back to his newspaper, conversation over. Save us both the embarrassment. So I found another way. Mrs. Eleanor Mitchell lived 3 houses down, a 78-year-old widow with a bad hip and a house too big for one person. I started helping her with groceries, then cleaning, then organizing her late husband's study. She paid me $15 an hour, cash, which I hid in a shoebox at the back of my closet. 23 books. That's what I accumulated over 2 years. SAT prep guides, AP review materials, college application handbooks, each one purchased in secret, hidden beneath winter sweaters my father would never touch. Each one represented 4 to 6 hours of scrubbing Mrs. Mitchell's kitchen floors. I counted them sometimes, late at night, ran my fingers over their spines like they were treasures. They were treasures. They were proof that I refused to believe his version of my future. I just didn't know how quickly he would turn them to ash. The truth about me, the real truth, existed in a folder on Mrs. Margaret Thompson's desk at Westbrook High. Mrs. Thompson was our guidance counselor, 54 years old, 28 years in education, with silver-streaked hair she wore in a practical bun and reading glasses that perpetually hung from a beaded chain around her neck. She was the kind of woman who remembered every student's name and noticed when something was wrong before you even knew how to explain it. She was also the only adult who had ever looked at my transcript and seen potential instead of a problem to manage. Dahlia, she'd said the day I came to her office in November, hands shaking, asking if she could help me apply to colleges without my father knowing. Your numbers are exceptional. Top 5% of your class, SAT scores that most students would trade a kidney for. She'd pulled off her glasses, cleaned them on her cardigan. Why hasn't anyone at home noticed this? They notice, I said. They just don't believe it means anything. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out a folder labeled Bowen Dahlia and opened it to reveal my entire academic history. Every grade, every test score, every teacher comment. This means something, she said. This means everything. And if the people at home can't see that, then we'll find people who will. She helped me write my Harvard essay, all 47 pages of drafts, revisions, heart-bleeding truth about my mother's death, and my volunteer work in the hospice where she took her last breath. Whatever happens, Mrs. Thompson told me the day I clicked submit, remember, your worth was never theirs to decide. I held on to those words like a lifeline. I would need them sooner than I knew. April 8th, 2024. 6:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was staring at the kitchen clock when my father's hand slammed down on the counter. 67, he said, holding up my chemistry midterm like evidence in a trial. 67 out of 100. Do you know what this is, Dahlia? I knew what it was. It was the result of 3 sleepless nights spent at Mrs. Mitchell's bedside after she fell and fractured her hip. It was the consequence of choosing human compassion over molecular formulas. It was one test, one time, in a subject that wasn't even my strongest. But I also knew that explanations were just ammunition in this house. It's one exam, Dad. I can bring my grade up before... One exam. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's what your mother always said. One mistake, one missed deadline, one excuse after another. He crumpled the paper in his fist. I knew it. I always knew it. You're exactly like her. Pretty promises and no follow-through. My grandmother appeared in the doorway, drawn by the noise. My Aunt Vivian materialized behind her, fresh from whatever errand had brought her to our house. Neither of them stepped forward. Neither of them spoke. Dad, please. Please what? He was standing now, and I noticed for the first time how tall he seemed when he was angry. Please pretend you're something you're not. Please waste more money on textbooks you'll never understand. His eyes moved toward the hallway, toward my bedroom. I think it's time we stopped pretending, Dahlia. He walked past me, footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor, and I felt something cold settle in my chest, the premonition of disaster, arriving seconds too late. He knew about the closet. I don't know how. Maybe he'd searched my room while I was at school. Or maybe fathers just have an instinct for finding the things their children try to hide. But when he threw open my closet door and shoved aside the winter sweaters, his hand found the shoebox like he'd been rehearsing this moment for months. What's this? He dumped the contents onto my bed. 23 books spilled across the comforter. SAT guides, AP prep materials, college application handbooks. 2 years of secret purchases. 2 years of hope, now exposed. You've been hiding money from me? His voice dropped to something worse than shouting, a quiet, controlled fury that made my skin crawl. Lying to my face while you snuck around behind my back? I earned that money. I worked for it. You live in my house. He grabbed an armful of books and strode toward the back door. Everything you have is because I allow it. I followed him into the backyard, my grandmother and aunt watching from the kitchen window like spectators at a car accident. The fire pit we used for summer barbecues sat in the center of the lawn, and my father was already pouring lighter fluid over my books. Dad, please, please don't. The match struck. The flame caught. I watched them burn. 1, 2, 3. I counted each one as the pages curled and blackened, as the spines cracked and split, as 2 years of secret hope turned to smoke. When he went back inside, he returned with something else. My essay. 47 pages, printed and bound, the only physical copy I had. The story of my mother's death, my volunteer work, my dreams, everything I'd poured into my Harvard application. He didn't even glance at the first page. This is the worthless garbage you've been wasting time on? The papers hit the fire. My mother's memory, my careful words, my future. Ash in seconds. I didn't cry. I had learned long ago not to give them that satisfaction. But something inside me went very, very quiet. My father brushed ash from his hands like he'd just completed a satisfying chore. Now that the fantasy is over, he said, turning to face my grandmother and Aunt Vivian with the air of a man delivering good news. Let me tell you about the real plan. He walked back into the kitchen. I followed on numb legs, moving through the motions of being human, while something inside me screamed. I've been in contact with the Harrison family's housekeeping service. He poured himself a scotch, casual, celebratory. They've agreed to take Dahlia on starting next Monday, $400 a month, which I'll hold for her until she's mature enough to manage it herself. Aunt Vivian smiled. Actually smiled. Well, at least she'll be useful to someone. My grandmother nodded approvingly. Honest work, nothing wrong with that. I found my voice somewhere beneath the rubble of my demolished dreams. Do I get a choice? My father looked at me like I'd asked if the sky was purple. You've proven you're not capable of making choices, Dahlia. You failed when it mattered, so from now on, I'll make the decisions. He sipped his scotch. It's for your own good. That night, I lay in my empty bedroom, no books on the shelves, no essay drafts in my desk, and stared at the ceiling until my eyes burned. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd buried me. He didn't know that somewhere in his email, a secret was waiting to dig me out. 2 days later, my phone buzzed during lunch period. Mrs. Thompson, come to my office. Now, important. Elena Reyes, my best friend since freshman year, looked up from her sandwich. Everything okay? I don't know. I gathered my things with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Mrs. Thompson wants to see me. Elena's eyes narrowed. She knew about the fire. I'd told her everything in a rushed, tearful phone call the night it happened. Want me to come with? No, I'll text you after. Mrs. Thompson's office was at the end of the administrative hallway, past the principal's suite and the records room. When I pushed open the door, she was standing behind her desk with her phone pressed to her ear, and the expression on her face made my stomach drop. "She just walked in," Mrs. Thompson said into the phone. "Yes, I'll tell her. Thank you." She hung up and gestured for me to close the door. "Sit down, Dahlia." I sat. "That was Harvard," she said. "Their admissions office." The world tilted. Harvard. Harvard was calling my guidance counselor. That couldn't be normal. That couldn't be. "They wanted to know why you withdrew your application." "I didn't." The words came out strangled. "I never withdrew anything. I've been waiting to hear back. I thought—" Mrs. Thompson held up her hand. "That's what I told them. But Dahlia—" She paused, and I watched her choose her next words with the care of someone defusing a bomb. "Someone responded to Harvard using your family email address. 3 weeks ago. They told admissions you had chosen to attend a different institution." The room went cold. "Dahlia, were you aware that you were accepted? That Harvard offered you a full scholarship?" I couldn't breathe. $312,000 for 4 years. And someone had thrown it away. Mrs. Thompson spread the evidence across her desk like a prosecutor laying out exhibits. "The original acceptance email was sent March 15th at 9:47 a.m., she said, pointing to a printed copy with Harvard's crimson letterhead. "Full scholarship, $312,000 over 4 years. Congratulations, by the way, though I wish we were celebrating under different circumstances." I stared at the paper, my name, my address, an acceptance I never knew existed. The email was opened the following morning, March 16th at 7:12 a.m. from the IP address registered to your home. She slid another paper forward, and on March 20th at 11:23 p.m., a response was sent from the same family email account. I read the words, each one a knife. "Dahlia Bowen has decided to attend a different institution. Please remove her from your acceptance list. Thank you for your consideration." "That's not—" My voice cracked. "I didn't write that. I never even saw—" "I know." Mrs. Thompson's voice was gentle but firm. "Harvard records all incoming calls for quality assurance. On March 20th, someone called their admissions office to confirm the withdrawal. A man. He identified himself as your father." She pulled out her phone, pressed play. My father's voice filled the room. "My daughter is not college material. She has other plans. I made sure of that." I made sure of that. The words echoed in my skull, rattling against every memory of being told I wasn't enough, every burned book, every crumpled test paper. 3 weeks, I whispered. He knew for 3 weeks. He'd watched me study, watched me hope, watched me believe I still had a chance, all while knowing he'd already taken it away. Mrs. Thompson reached across the desk and took my hand. "Dahlia, Harvard is willing to reinstate your acceptance. The question is, what do you want to do about it?" For 5 years, silence had been my survival strategy. Don't argue. Don't explain. Don't give them ammunition. Smile, nod, retreat to your room, and wait for the storm to pass. It was how I'd made it through my mother's death, my father's control, my grandmother's cutting remarks. It was how I'd protected the small, secret part of myself that still dared to hope. But sitting in Mrs. Thompson's office, holding proof that my own father had sabotaged my future, I realized something. Silence wasn't protecting me anymore. Silence was burying me alive. "The end-of-year parent meeting is Friday evening," Mrs. Thompson said, watching my face carefully. 147 families will be there. Your father has already signed up to speak. Slot 7:45 p.m. He told the office he wants to discuss his daughter's transition to the workforce. My hands clenched in my lap. Principal Morrison knows about this situation. He's prepared to give me a few minutes after your father's remarks, if you want them. She paused. "We have the evidence, Dahlia. The emails, the phone recording. Harvard has verified everything. The question isn't whether the truth can come out. The question is whether you're ready to let it." I thought about 23 books burning, 47 pages of my mother's memory turned to ash. 5 years of being told I was nothing, I was worthless, I was exactly like the woman my father blamed for dying and leaving him. I thought about standing in front of 147 families while my father smiled his charming smile and explained why his daughter wasn't college material. Friday, I said. I'll be there. Mrs. Thompson nodded slowly. Then we have 5 days to prepare. 5 days of smiling at the man who'd burned my future. I could do that. I'd been doing it my whole life. The next 5 days were a masterclass in performance. I came home at 4:30 every afternoon, right on schedule. I ate dinner with my father, nodding when he lectured about the importance of hard work and the dangers of unrealistic expectations. I called Mrs. Harrison's housekeeping service on Tuesday and scheduled an interview for the Monday after the parent meeting, just as he'd instructed. Finally showing some sense, he said when I reported the appointment. See? This is what happens when you accept reality instead of chasing fantasies. Yes, Dad. Reality. He had no idea what reality was about to look like. On Wednesday, I visited Mrs. Mitchell under the pretense of checking on her hip. She was recovering well, shuffling around her kitchen with a walker and refusing to let her daughter hire professional help. Dahlia, dear, you look exhausted. She patted the chair beside her. Sit. Talk to me. So I did. I told her everything, the fire, the scholarship, my father's betrayal. Her weathered face went through shock, anger, and finally, a grim kind of recognition. I wish I could say I was surprised. She shook her head slowly. 2 years ago, your father came over to borrow my hedge trimmer. We got to talking about you kids and college, and he said— She hesitated. What did he say? He said you'd never go to university, that he'd made sure of that. Called it his long-term plan for keeping you grounded. Her eyes were wet. I thought he was being dramatic. I should have said something. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. 2 years. He'd been planning this for 2 years. It's okay, Mrs. Mitchell. I squeezed her hand. You're telling me now. That's what matters. Her testimony, another piece of the puzzle, falling into place. Friday couldn't come soon enough. Thursday afternoon, I met Mrs. Thompson and Principal Morrison in his office. The evidence was laid out on the conference table like exhibits in a courtroom. The original Harvard acceptance email with full headers showing the timestamp and IP address, the fraudulent response my father had sent, the transcript of the phone call, certified by Harvard's legal department, and my complete academic record, 4.3 GPA, 1580 SAT, 400 hours of verified volunteer service. Everything checks out, Principal Morrison said. He was a tall man in his late 50s, with the kind of face that had seen too many parent disputes to be shocked by anything anymore. Harvard has confirmed the recording is authentic. They announced at the start of the call that it would be recorded for quality purposes, which makes it legally admissible in Connecticut. Mrs. Thompson pulled out one more document. This came in this morning. Official reinstatement of Dahlia's acceptance, signed by the Dean of Admissions herself. I looked at the paper. My name, Harvard College, class of 2028. How do you want to handle tomorrow? Principal Morrison asked. Mrs. Thompson will speak after your father. We can keep it straightforward, just the facts. Just the facts, I agreed. I don't want drama, I don't want revenge. I just want people to know the truth. Speaking of which, Morrison cleared his throat. I should tell you. When your father registered for the parent meeting, he specifically requested that the school not send any college-related correspondence to your home address. He said it was to avoid unnecessary confusion. My stomach turned. Every possible exit blocked. Every avenue of hope sealed off. He really thought of everything, I said quietly. Almost everything. Mrs. Thompson gathered the documents. He didn't think of us. Tomorrow, 147 families. And the truth, finally ready to speak. Thursday night, I sat alone in my empty bedroom, holding my mother's unfinished scarf. The cream-colored wool was soft against my fingers, familiar as a lullaby. I could almost see her hands working the needles, hear her voice humming something wordless and warm. She'd been making it for me, a Christmas present she never got to give. "Mom," I whispered into the darkness. "I'm scared." No answer. There was never an answer. But sometimes, when I held the scarf close enough, I could almost pretend. My phone buzzed. "Elena, you okay?" "No." "Yes." "I don't know. Tomorrow's going to be insane." "I know." "You sure about this?" I thought about the alternative: swallowing my father's lies, taking the housekeeping job, watching my Harvard acceptance expire while he smiled and said it was for my own good. "Yeah, I'm sure. I'll be there. Front row. If anyone gives you trouble, I'll create a diversion." "What kind of diversion?" "Haven't decided yet. Probably something involving the fire alarm." I almost laughed. "Almost. Don't get expelled on my account." "No promises." I put down the phone and looked at my mother's scarf again. The last row she'd knitted was uneven. Her hands had already been weak by then, the cancer stealing her coordination before it stole the rest. "I won't let him bury me, Mom," I said. "Not anymore." Somewhere outside, a car passed. The refrigerator hummed downstairs. My father was probably in his office, practicing his speech for tomorrow, rehearsing the narrative he'd spent years constructing. He thought he knew how this story ended. He was wrong. I tucked the scarf into my bag, my mother's last gift, my secret armor, and waited for morning. Before I tell you what happened at that parent meeting, I want to ask you something. Do you think I should have stayed quiet? Let my father keep controlling the story? Or was I right to let the truth come out? Comment below and let me know what you would have done. And if you've made it this far, hit that like button so I know you want to hear what comes next. Friday, April 18th, 2024, 7 o'clock p.m. The Westbrook High Auditorium could seat 500 people, but tonight it felt full to bursting. 147 families packed the rows, mothers in silk blouses, fathers in pressed khakis, teenagers squirming in seats they'd sat in for countless assemblies. The air smelled like expensive perfume and barely concealed competition. This was the annual end-of-year parent meeting, Westbrook's unofficial status Olympics. Families came to hear about their children's achievements, their scholarships, their acceptances to prestigious universities. They came to compare, to congratulate, to quietly calculate who had won the parenting race. My father loved this event. He sat in the third row, close enough to the stage to be seen, far enough to appear humble. He wore his navy blazer, the one he saved for important clients and community appearances. Beside him, my grandmother Patricia sat with her hands folded primly in her lap, and Aunt Vivian was checking her reflection in her phone screen. I sat in the back corner, next to Elena. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. "You've got this," Elena whispered, squeezing my hand. "What if I freeze? What if I can't?" "Then I'll pull the fire alarm and we'll all evacuate. Problem solved." I managed a weak smile. At the faculty table near the stage, Mrs. Thompson caught my eye and nodded once. Beside her, Principal Morrison reviewed his notes with practiced calm. The program listed my father's speaking slot at 7:45 p.m. Richard Bowen, Preparing Our Children for Realistic Futures. 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, he would stand up there and tell 350 people that his daughter wasn't college material. And then, finally, someone would tell them the truth. And now, please welcome Mr. Richard Bowen. Polite applause rippled through the auditorium as my father strode to the microphone. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who had spent decades selling things, houses, ideas, himself. Under the stage lights, his silver-touched hair looked distinguished, his smile warm and genuine. He was, in that moment, the picture of a concerned, loving father. "Thank you, Principal Morrison." He adjusted the microphone, letting the pause build anticipation. Tonight, I want to talk about something that isn't easy for any parent to discuss: acknowledging our children's limitations. A murmur passed through the crowd. This wasn't the usual boasting about SAT scores and early admissions. My daughter Dahlia is a wonderful girl, kind, hardworking, but over the past year, I've had to accept something that every parent eventually faces. He paused for effect. Not every child is cut out for higher education. I felt Elena's hand tighten on mine. I know that's not what we're supposed to say in Westbrook. Self-deprecating laugh, perfectly calibrated. We're supposed to pretend every kid is Harvard-bound, push them until they break, and then wonder why they struggle. But I've made a different choice for my family. He looked out at the crowd. Not at me. Never at me. Dahlia won't be attending college. Instead, she'll be entering the workforce, learning practical skills, contributing to society in a meaningful way. It was a difficult decision, but I believe it's the right one. And I hope other parents will consider that sometimes accepting reality is the most loving thing we can do. More murmurs, a few scattered claps from parents who appreciated the brave honesty. My grandmother was beaming. Aunt Vivian looked smug. My father smiled at the audience, basking in his moment. Sometimes, knowing your child's limits is the greatest gift you can give them. Thank you. He stepped back from the microphone, and across the auditorium, Principal Morrison stood up. Thank you, Mr. Bowen. And now, I'd like to invite Mrs. Margaret Thompson to share some additional information regarding Dahlia Bowen. My father's smile flickered, just for a second, but I saw it. I couldn't breathe. My father's words were still echoing in my ears. Not college material, accepting reality, knowing your child's limits. And 350 people had just watched him explain why his daughter was a failure. Some of them had nodded along. Some had applauded. In my pocket, my mother's scarf felt like the only real thing in the world. He's been telling this lie for years, I thought. To them. To himself. Maybe even to me. And the worst part was, some part of me had believed it. Every time he said I wasn't smart enough. Every time my grandmother compared me to my mother like it was a diagnosis. Every time I hid my achievements because I knew they would find a way to diminish them. I had spent 17 years shrinking myself to fit inside their expectations. No more. Mrs. Thompson was walking to the microphone now, folder in hand. My father was still standing near the stage, confusion rippling across his features. "What is this?" I heard him ask. "I wasn't informed about any additional—" "Please return to your seat, Mr. Bowen," Principal Morrison said calmly. "This won't take long." 350 people watching? My grandmother's smile fading. Aunt Vivian's phone finally lowered. Elena squeezed my hand one last time. 5 years of silence, I thought. 5 years of letting him write my story. Mrs. Thompson adjusted the microphone, and the truth prepared to speak. My father didn't return to his seat. He stood frozen near the stage steps, one hand gripping the railing, his salesman's smile locked in place. But his eyes were scanning the room, calculating, trying to figure out what angle he'd missed. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, loud enough for the microphone to catch. "I wasn't aware there was anything more to discuss about my daughter. Perhaps this should wait for a private meeting. This concerns the entire community, Mr. Bowen." Mrs. Thompson's voice was steady, professional, utterly calm. "I think everyone here will want to hear it." The auditorium had gone completely silent. No rustling programs, no whispered conversations. 350 people holding their breath. I watched my grandmother's expression shift from confidence to confusion. Watched Aunt Vivian's smug smile waver. Watched my father's knuckles whiten on the railing. "What is this about?" he demanded. "I have a right to know." "You'll know in a moment." Mrs. Thompson opened her folder with deliberate care. "Please take your seat." He didn't move. Couldn't move, maybe. For the first time in my life, I saw something like fear in my father's eyes. He looked at me then, found me in the back of the auditorium, sitting beside Elena with my hands clasped tight in my lap. Our eyes met across 350 witnesses. I didn't look away. I didn't smile. I just waited. Mrs. Thompson pulled a sheet of paper from her folder and held it up so the front rows could see the crimson Harvard letterhead. "Tonight," she said, "I need to share some important information about Dahlia Bowen and about the truth." My father's face went pale. And finally, someone was about to tell his story the way it actually happened. Mrs. Thompson's voice carried across the silent auditorium like a blade cutting silk. On March 15, 2024, at 9:47 a.m., Harvard University sent an acceptance letter to Dahlia Bowen. She held up the document, crimson letterhead visible even from the back rows, along with a full scholarship valued at $312,000 for 4 years of undergraduate study. The gasp that went through the crowd was audible. Dahlia did not know about this acceptance. Mrs. Thompson let that sink in. The email was sent to her family address, an account controlled by her father. It was opened the following morning, March 16th, at 7:12 a.m., from the Bowen residence. My father had gone completely still, a statue in a navy blazer. On March 20th at 11:23 p.m., a response was sent from that same family email account. Mrs. Thompson read from the paper. "Dahlia Bowen has decided to attend a different institution. Please remove her from your acceptance list." "That's a lie." My father's voice cracked through the silence. "Someone must have hacked. Harvard records all incoming phone calls for quality assurance," Mrs. Thompson continued, unperturbed. On the same day the email was sent, a man called the admissions office to confirm Dahlia's withdrawal. He identified himself as her father. She pulled out her phone. "I have that recording here, verified by Harvard's legal department. Would you like to hear it, Mr. Bowen?" She pressed play. My father's voice filled the auditorium, tinny but unmistakable. "My daughter is not college material. She has other plans. I made sure of that." I made sure of that. The words hung in the air like smoke. 350 people turned to look at my father. "Dahlia Bowen earned that acceptance," Mrs. Thompson said quietly. "She has a 4.3 GPA, a 1580 SAT score, and over 400 hours of volunteer service. She wrote a 47-page essay about losing her mother to cancer and finding purpose in helping others. And someone in her own family tried to take all of that away from her." The silence was deafening. My grandmother had stopped breathing. "That recording is fabricated!" My father's voice came out strangled, desperate. He stepped toward the stage, hands raised like he could physically stop what was happening. This is a coordinated attack. My daughter and this teacher have conspired to—" "Mr. Bowen?" A woman's voice cut through his protests. Mrs. Peterson, 3 rows back, mother of the girl going to Brown. She was standing now, her pearls catching the light. "That was clearly your voice on that recording." "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Her voice was ice. "You sabotaged your own child's future. You stood up here and called her a failure when you knew she'd been accepted to Harvard." More murmurs now, heads shaking, faces twisted in disgust. My grandmother rose unsteadily from her seat. "Richard," her voice was barely audible. "Richard, what did you do?" He turned to her, and for one moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Mother, I was trying to protect her. She's not ready for that world. She's too fragile, too much like Sarah." "Don't!" The word came out of me before I could stop it. I was standing now, my legs moving without permission, carrying me toward the aisle. "Don't talk about her. Don't you ever talk about her." The auditorium swiveled to face me. I walked toward the front, my mother's scarf a warm weight in my pocket. My father's face cycled through shock, anger, and something that might have been fear. "Dahlia." "You burned my books," I said, and my voice didn't shake. "You burned my essay about Mom. You called me worthless." I stopped at the front row, looking up at him. "And the whole time you knew Harvard wanted me." "You'll never forgive me for this," he said. "You're right," I replied. "I won't." Aunt Vivian was already heading for the exit. The auditorium erupted. Not into chaos, Westbrook was too refined for that, but into 100 small reactions that added up to something devastating. Whispered conversations, phones being pulled out, parents leaning together, shaking their heads, shooting glances at my father like he was a stranger who'd wandered into their neighborhood. "I can't believe it," someone muttered behind me. His own daughter. The scholarship alone, $300,000. Did you hear what he said on that recording? I made sure of that. He planned this. Principal Morrison stepped to the microphone. "I'm going to ask everyone to remain calm. Mr. Bowen, I think it's best if you leave the auditorium." My father stood frozen, his salesman's charm crumbling like wet paper. He looked around for an ally, his mother, who wouldn't meet his eyes, his sister, already gone, the neighbors and colleagues who had always admired him, now staring with something between pity and revulsion. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice had no power left. "This is a misunderstanding." "Dad!" I stepped closer and he flinched, actually flinched. "It's over." Mrs. Peterson was at my elbow now. "Dahlia, honey, if you need somewhere to stay tonight, our door is open." "Mine too," another voice called. And another. I felt Elena's hand on my shoulder. Mrs. Thompson was beside me, solid and steady. My father looked at the crowd of parents who had once admired him, at the community he had spent decades cultivating. Then he looked at me, really looked, maybe for the first time. Whatever he saw made him turn away. He walked to the exit without another word, his footsteps echoing in the hushed auditorium. The door swung shut behind him. And just like that, his version of my story ended. Principal Morrison gestured toward the microphone. "Dahlia, if you'd like to say anything." I hadn't planned to speak. The evidence was supposed to be enough. But standing there, with 350 pairs of eyes on me, with my mother's scarf in my pocket and my future finally visible on the horizon, I realized I had something to say after all. I walked to the microphone. My hands weren't shaking anymore. "I didn't come here tonight to humiliate anyone," I said. "I came here because I wanted the truth, for the first time in my life." The auditorium was completely silent. "Harvard has reinstated my acceptance. I'll be starting there this fall." I paused. "But I don't want you to remember tonight as the night Richard Bowen was exposed. I want you to remember it as the night a 17-year-old girl learned that her worth isn't decided by the people who are supposed to love her." I looked toward the door where my father had disappeared. "I don't hate him," I said, and I meant it. "I just wish he had tried, even once, to see who I actually am." I stepped back from the microphone. The applause started somewhere in the middle rows and spread outward until it filled the room. Not triumphant, not cruel, just acknowledgement, validation. For the first time in 17 years, people were clapping for me. Not for my father's version of me, for me. And as I walked back to Elena, I realized I was crying. But they were different tears this time. You know, standing in front of 350 people that night, I was terrified. But I knew that if I didn't speak up, no one would do it for me. If you've ever been in a situation where you had to choose between staying silent and defending yourself, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment below. And if you want to know what happened next, keep watching. I didn't go back to Maple Ridge Drive that night. The Reyes family lived in a modest colonial on the other side of town. 3 bedrooms, a perpetually barking golden retriever, and a kitchen that always smelled like Elena's mother's cooking. When Dr. Reyes opened the door at 9:30 p.m. and saw me standing there with my backpack and my mother's scarf, he didn't ask questions. "Guest room's ready," he said. "Maria's making hot chocolate." Mrs. Reyes, a nurse at Westbrook General, where I'd done most of my volunteer hours, wrapped me in a hug the moment I walked in. "You stay as long as you need, mija. As long as you need." I couldn't speak, could only nod and try not to fall apart. Later, curled up in the guest bed with Elena beside me, I called Mrs. Mitchell. "Sweetheart." Her voice was thick with emotion. "I heard what happened. The whole town's talking about it. I'm sorry I won't be able to help you anymore, Mrs. Mitchell. I'll be. The words caught. I'll be going to Harvard. She laughed through what sounded like tears. Dahlia Grace Bowen, you listen to me. I have been waiting for this moment since the day I met you. Since the day I watched you carry my groceries up those stairs with a stack of SAT books hidden in your backpack. You knew? I've known a lot of things, honey, including what kind of man your father is. She paused. You go to that school. You become everything you were meant to be. And don't you ever, ever apologize for it. That night, I slept in a stranger's guest room, except they didn't feel like strangers. They felt like the family I should have had all along. Monday morning, I sat in a small office at the Westbrook Community Legal Clinic. Mrs. Thompson had made the appointment. The lawyer, a kind-eyed woman named Patricia Holloway who specialized in family law, had agreed to see me pro bono. The good news, she said, reviewing my file, is that Connecticut allows minors to petition for emancipation starting at age 16. At 17 with a guaranteed income source, which your Harvard scholarship provides, the court will almost certainly approve. I don't want to sue my father, I said quickly. I just want to be free of him. And you can be. She slid a document across the desk. This petition establishes your legal independence. Once approved, you'll have the right to sign contracts, manage your own finances, make your own medical decisions. Your father will have no legal authority over you. I stared at the paper. 6 months ago, I'd needed his permission to buy a cup of coffee. Now I was signing documents that would sever his control forever. There's one more thing. Ms. Holloway pulled out another form. You'll need a bank account in your own name. For the scholarship disbursement, for living expenses, everything. I can help you set that up today. An hour later, I walked out of the clinic with a pending emancipation petition and a brand new bank account. Balance, $0. But my name was the only one on it. I stood on the sidewalk, looking at the debit card they'd given me. Dahlia Bowen stamped in small letters across the bottom, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility. The future wasn't something being done to me anymore. It was something I was choosing. April 22nd, 2024. The email arrived at 3:47 p.m. while I was sitting in the Reyes family kitchen doing calculus homework. From Harvard College Office of Admissions. Subject, Confirmation of Acceptance, Dahlia G. Bowen. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open it. Dear Ms. Bowen, we are pleased to confirm your acceptance to Harvard College, Class of 2028. Following the resolution of the administrative irregularity with your application, your full scholarship in the amount of $312,000 over 4 years remains intact. We look forward to welcoming you to campus this fall. Congratulations on your extraordinary achievements, and please know that the entire admissions committee was moved by your application essay. Veritas, Dr. Amanda Chen, Dean of Admissions. Elena found me crying at the kitchen table, clutching my phone like it might disappear. It's real, I managed. It's actually real. She grabbed the phone, read the email, and screamed loud enough to bring both her parents running. Within minutes, I was surrounded by people hugging me, congratulating me, treating my success like something worth celebrating. This was what it was supposed to feel like. That night, I started a journal, something I hadn't done since my mother died. April 22nd, 2024, I wrote, "Today, I begin again." Below that, I taped a printout of the Harvard email. And below that, I wrote 3 words my mother used to say to me every night before bed. Words I hadn't let myself remember in 5 years. You are enough. There was still a message waiting on my phone, from my grandmother, but I wasn't ready to read it. Not yet. Not until I figured out who I was without them telling me. The fallout was swift and thorough. By the following Monday, the story had spread through Westbrook like wildfire through dry brush. I heard updates from Elena, from Mrs. Thompson, from Mrs. Mitchell's daily phone calls. The Westbrook Real Estate Board requested my father's resignation on Tuesday. To preserve the integrity of the organization, their letter reportedly said, he complied without protest. By Wednesday, 3 clients had pulled their listings from his agency, then 5. By Friday, the number was up to 8, an estimated $120,000 in lost commissions. My grandmother's Thursday bridge club at St. Michael's suddenly had scheduling conflicts that prevented her from attending. The ladies she'd played cards with for 30 years stopped returning her calls. On Facebook, someone had posted about the parent meeting. Within a day, it had accumulated 147 comments, exactly the number of families who had been there. The consensus was universal. Richard Bowen had sabotaged his own daughter's future. "I always thought something was off about him," one comment read. "Too polished, too perfect. That poor girl. To have a father like that." He stood up there and called her a failure, knowing he'd stolen her acceptance. What kind of person does that? My father posted his own response on Sunday, a carefully worded apology that blamed a misguided attempt to protect my daughter from pressure she wasn't ready for. He didn't tag me. He didn't mention Harvard. He didn't acknowledge the scholarship. I didn't read it. Elena sent me a screenshot, and I deleted it without looking twice. The man who had controlled every narrative about me for 17 years had finally lost control of this one, and I was already moving on. The text from my grandmother arrived the same day as my father's public apology. "Dahlia, I didn't know what your father had done. I trusted him. I believed him when he said you weren't suited for college. I'm so sorry. Can we talk?" I read it 17 times before I could figure out how to respond. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that she'd simply been deceived, that her cruelty over the years had been ignorance rather than malice. But I remembered her standing in the kitchen doorway while my books burned. I remembered her nodding when my father called me worthless. I remembered every time she'd compared me to my mother as if being like her was a disease. She hadn't been deceived. She'd been complicit. I drafted my response over 3 days, writing and deleting, trying to find words that were honest without being cruel. "Grandma," I finally wrote, "thank you for reaching out. But I need you to understand something. You were there when Dad burned my books. You said he was doing the right thing. You've spent 5 years telling me I was just like Mom. And you didn't mean it as a compliment. I don't hate you. But I need time. Maybe a lot of time. If you genuinely want to rebuild this relationship, it has to start with you being honest, with yourself and with me, about the role you played. I'm not ready to talk yet. Please respect that." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. She didn't reply. I had expected that to hurt more than it did. Instead, I just felt lighter. For the first time in my life, I had set a boundary, and I hadn't apologized for it. The email from my father arrived 2 weeks after the parent meeting. "Dahlia, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to explain. When your mother died, something broke in me. I was terrified of losing you too. To the world, to ambition, to the same dreams that I always felt took her away from us. I thought if I kept you close, kept you small, I could protect you. I was wrong. I know that now. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking for a chance to do better. Please, Dahlia, come home. Let's talk. Your father." I read it 3 times, looking for the manipulation, the blame shifting, the subtle suggestion that this was somehow my fault, or my mother's, or anyone's but his. But all I found was fear. He was scared. He'd always been scared, and he'd let that fear turn him into a monster. It didn't excuse what he'd done. It didn't repair the books he'd burned, the essay he'd destroyed, the acceptance he'd hidden. It didn't give back the 5 years I'd spent believing I was worthless. But it was the first honest thing he'd ever said to me. I wrote back, "Dad, I read your email. I believe that you were scared. But fear doesn't justify what you did. You didn't protect me. You tried to bury me. I don't hate you. But I can't have you in my life right now. Maybe not for a long time. If you really want to make things right, start by being honest with yourself about what you did. not misguided protection. The truth. I'm going to focus on my future. I hope you find peace with yours. Dahlia. I didn't block him. I just didn't wait for a response. May 2024 arrived like a reward for surviving April. Principal Morrison called me into his office on the 3rd to tell me I'd been selected as a graduation speaker, not the valedictorian address, but a special recognition for overcoming adversity with grace. I tried to decline, but Mrs. Thompson overruled me. "You've earned this," she said. "Let them see who you really are." The Rotary Club of Westbrook awarded me a $5,000 scholarship for academic excellence and community service. At the presentation, 3 members pulled me aside to say they'd heard about what happened and were proud of how I'd handled it. The Westbrook Gazette ran a small feature. Local student overcomes adversity, heads to Harvard. They included my graduation photo and a quote from Mrs. Thompson about my volunteer work. They did not mention my father by name, and on a Tuesday afternoon, a package arrived at the Reyes house with no return address. Inside were 23 books, SAT prep guides, AP review materials, college application handbooks. The same books my father had burned, replaced one for one with a note in shaky handwriting. "Dahlia, these aren't replacements. Nothing can replace what was taken from you. But maybe they can be a beginning. I always knew you were special. I should have told you sooner. With love, Eleanor." I sat on the guest bed, holding a brand new copy of the SAT prep guide I'd scrubbed floors to afford, and let myself cry. Not from sadness, not from grief. From the overwhelming realization that even when my family had failed me, there had always been people who saw who I was. And now, finally, I could see it too. June 2nd, 2024, 3:12 p.m. The Westbrook High football field had been transformed into a sea of blue and gold, and 487 seniors in matching caps and gowns, arranged in alphabetical rows on folding chairs. The bleachers were packed with families, phones raised, tissues ready. I sat in the B section, between Brian Bowman and Catherine Boyd, with my mother's scarf hidden under my graduation gown. It felt right, bringing her with me to this. When Principal Morrison called my name, the applause was louder than I expected. I walked to the podium on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The microphone was too high. I adjusted it with hands that didn't shake. "I was asked to speak today about overcoming adversity," I began. "But I don't think that's quite right. I don't think you overcome adversity. I think you learn to carry it with you and to keep moving anyway." 487 faces looked up at me. For most of my life, I believed that my worth was determined by other people. By grades, by approval, by whether the people around me thought I deserved to succeed. I paused. I was wrong. Your worth isn't something anyone can give you or take away. It's not in your GPA or your acceptance letters or the opinions of people who don't really know you. Your worth is in how you treat people, in whether you choose kindness when cruelty would be easier, in whether you keep hoping when everything around you says you shouldn't. I looked out at the crowd, at Elena waving in the front row, at Mrs. Thompson wiping her eyes, at the empty seats where my father and grandmother should have been. So to all of you, keep hoping, keep trying, and don't let anyone tell you who you're allowed to become. The applause carried me off the stage. August 25th, 2024. Bradley International Airport. 7:15 a.m. The terminal was chaos. Families saying goodbye, students hauling overstuffed suitcases, a toddler screaming somewhere near Gate 12. I stood at the security checkpoint with my single carry-on and my mother's scarf wrapped around my neck, despite the August heat. The Reyes family surrounded me in a semicircle of tearful smiles. "You call us every week," Mrs. Reyes said, crushing me in a hug that smelled like her homemade pan dulce. "Every week. You hear me?" "Every week," I promised. Dr. Reyes pressed something into my hand. A small emergency card with their contact information and his professional pager number. "Anything you need, anytime, We mean it. Elena grabbed me last, holding on longer than either of us expected. You're going to be amazing, she whispered. You already are. What am I going to do without you? Probably get better grades, since I won't be texting you during class. She pulled back, eyes wet. Now go, before I change my mind and stuff you in my suitcase. Mrs. Thompson had come too. She stood a few feet back, giving the family their moment, but I walked over and hugged her anyway. Thank you, I said, for everything, for believing in me when… Dahlia. She held me at arm's length. I didn't give you anything you didn't already have. I just helped you see it. I walked toward security, turned back once to wave, and then stepped through the gate. In my pocket was a letter I hadn't opened yet, one that Mrs. Mitchell had given me the day before, with instructions not to read it until I was on the plane. Your mother asked me to keep it safe, she'd said, until you were ready. I was ready now. Somewhere over Pennsylvania, I opened the letter. The paper was yellowed, soft at the creases where it had been folded and unfolded over the years. My mother's handwriting, looping, elegant, instantly recognizable, filled the page. My dearest Dahlia, if you're reading this, then Eleanor has kept her promise, and you've grown into someone ready to receive it. I'm writing this on your 12th birthday. The doctors say I have a few months left, maybe less. I wanted to leave you something, not things, but words. The words I might not be able to say later. I know your father isn't easy. I know he's scared, and I know that fear makes him hard sometimes. I wish I could promise he'll soften after I'm gone, but I can't. What I can promise is this: his fear is not your truth. You are smart, you are kind, you are braver than you know, and you deserve every single dream you've ever had, even the ones you haven't dreamed yet. There will be people who try to tell you who you are. Some of them will be family. Don't believe them, sweetheart. Believe yourself. Believe the voice inside you that knows what you're capable of, even when no one else does. I wish I could be there to see you graduate, go to college, fall in love, become whoever you're meant to be. But even though I can't be there, I want you to know, I already see it. I see all of it. And I am so, so proud of the woman you're going to become. I love you, Dahlia. More than words, more than letters, more than anything this world can offer. Forever and always, Mom. The letter was wet by the time I finished reading. I hadn't realized I was crying until a flight attendant stopped to ask if I was okay. I'm fine, I said. I'm better than fine. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into my journal, next to my Harvard acceptance email. Some things survive, even death. Love, apparently, was one of them. September 3rd, 2024. Harvard Yard. 9:12 a.m. The Johnston Gate rose above me like a promise. Red brick and wrought iron, the words "Enter to grow in wisdom," carved into stone that had watched thousands of students walk through before me. I stood there for a long moment, just looking. Around me, other freshmen were navigating the controlled chaos of move-in day. Parents hauled mini fridges across the lawn. Orientation leaders in crimson shirts shouted directions. Someone was already lost, consulting a map with increasing desperation. I had arrived alone, by choice. This moment was mine. I didn't want to share it with anyone except the woman whose letter was pressed against my heart. You deserve every single dream you've ever had, she'd written, even the ones you haven't dreamed yet. Standing here, I realized this wasn't even the dream. This was the beginning of dreams I hadn't imagined yet. Dreams that were finally, blessedly, mine to choose. My phone buzzed. Elena. Well? Are you there? Send pics. I snapped a photo of the gate, sent it, and added, I'm here. I actually made it. Her response was immediate. Of course you did. Was there ever any doubt? I smiled, started typing a response, stopped. Because yes, there had been doubt. Years of it. Doubt planted and watered by people who should have believed in me, who should have seen what I could become. But I was here anyway. I adjusted my backpack, straightened my mother's scarf around my neck, and walked through the gate. No one was there to watch me do it. That was okay. I had spent 17 years performing for an audience that didn't deserve me. Now, finally, I was living for myself. That night, I sat in my dorm room, smaller than my bedroom at Maple Ridge, but entirely mine, and opened my journal. September 3rd, 2024, I wrote. First day at Harvard. First day of the rest of my life. I thought about everything that had led me here. The burned books, the stolen acceptance, the night I stood in front of 350 people and finally told the truth. I thought about my father, somewhere in Westbrook, living with the consequences of his fear. I thought about my grandmother, still waiting for a reply I wasn't ready to send. I thought about my mother, who had known, somehow, always, that I would make it here. Today I learned something, I wrote. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. You get to choose who comes through and when. I don't hate my father, I don't hate my grandmother, but I'm not ready to let them back in. And I don't have to apologize for that. For 17 years, I let other people decide who I was, what I deserved, what I could become. Never again. I closed the journal and looked out the window at the Cambridge lights, glittering like 1,000 small promises. Tomorrow, classes would start. I'd meet new people, learn new things, become someone I couldn't yet imagine. But tonight, I was just Dahlia Bowen, 18 years old, Harvard freshman, survivor. And that was enough. It was always enough. They tried to bury me, I thought. They didn't know I was a seed. If my story meant something to you, I'd really love to hear yours. Have you ever had to set boundaries with someone who was supposed to love you? Have you ever had to choose yourself, even when it was hard? Drop a comment below, subscribe if you haven't already, and check the description. There's another story waiting for you there that I think you'll want to hear. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here.